All right, day 3 of our Exploding Shapes project. You can see that I went ahead and completed the rest of my perspective lines. And so now I'm ready to color the spaces that has these coming out towards us. And so I used a variety of coloring things on my picture just so I could show you all the techniques on one paper. But that's not the best way to do it. It makes it a little bit crazy to have all those different media on there, but this is just for instructional purposes, just so you can see the different ways. And so let's go with this blue star first. And so this one, that's the one I used my watercolors with. I'm going to take the same color that I used for the star, which is this one, I believe, right here. And so I have a pretty thin brush. If you just have the one brush that came with your watercolor set, you can use that. You just have to be pretty careful. Usually those are pretty small. So I'm kind of just outlining this. Let me get a little more water on my brush. Let's see. And it is very hard to paint a thin straight line. You can see even with lots of experience, it's tricky for me too. So don't worry about a few little wavy bits here and there. So I'm kind of just outlining this. And now what I want to do is create a lighter shaded look. And so watercolors, I'm going to tell you this too. If you're using watercolors, good for you for being a risk taker with your materials. Watercolors is really not an easy media to paint with. It's not quite as forgiving as some of our other painting things that we use. So I've got a plain old wet brush here, no paint on it. So I am just taking my brush, and my outline's going to show still. You can see that is pretty dark, and I'm actually going to rinse this off to get the paint off of it again. And very wet. I'm not sure if it shows how wet my paper is here, but it's really wet, so I'm not going to want to pick this up if possible until it gets a little drier. So just going in, and I have a bit of a highlight there left in the middle of that shape. And so again, I am going to this one. I don't want to lose the definition of my the division of my spaces here, so just being really kind of careful. If you remember, I'm not sure if you do, or if you weren't with me, you may not have seen this. We watched a value video, and it showed the difference between someone shading with charcoal and with watercolor, and the watercolor didn't have those quite as smooth transitions. That's okay. That is just the nature of this type of paint. So I'm just kind of filling in these spaces, but I want them to remain a little bit lighter. Something I would advise, if you worked so hard getting all those perspective lines drawn and you are a bit worried about this, if you have a scrap paper that you can just practice the techniques on, that would be a great plan, just to make sure that you you don't instantly get a big puddle or something happens that really is disappointing because it messes up a lot of hard work. So, and if that happens, definitely not the end of the world. But just something I would like to do. If I was trying a brand new technique, I might want to do that first. All right, so this, we'll go with this little shape. That's red marker. So let's see, do I have my red marker handy? Here it is. So what I'm going to do for this, and you might, if you were with me for the Aspen project, if you use the marker technique, this will be familiar. I'm going to outline those spaces. Now there's a couple of ways you can handle this. If you're using very thin paper and you used marker for your shapes and you know the water technique is not going to work so well, you could trace these lines in with the marker that matches your shape and then use colored pencils or crayons and just lightly color in with that, and that's going to also work and give it that shaded effect. But our regular wet marker technique, if you remember that from before, is to just take a plain wet brush and you can create that shaded effect with that too. So I'm going to get even more off there. So that, and I left a little white spot. You might notice that on both of those just for the highlight on there. So that's how that technique would work. I'm going to put my water aside. So this red, that was a colored pencil. And so if I am using colored pencil, this will be very familiar with you when we did our spheres and ribbons. So that's kind of the same type of shading with that. You can just color your edges a little darker and then go in a little bit lighter to the center and shade like that. That's going to be very familiar with if you were with me for that spheres and ribbons. And the same exact thing with a crayon. Let's see, this little triangle was crayon, so exact same as the colored pencil. Now you saw I didn't use a tissue to blend that. Colored pencils and especially crayons, that would not work with. This little skinny place, I'm going to just darken that. So that would be the same, only we can't blend with the tissue, so our pressure has, changing in pressure from heavy to light, that has to do the work for us instead of the tissue. So, lots of options there for filling in these lines, and I will try to help you as best as I can to figure it out if you're confused about which lines go to which shape or anything tricky like that. But that's our final step, unless you want to do something cool with your background, which is totally optional. Thanks, and I'll see you later.